Would you be okay if your neighbor's cameras pointed directly into your backyard? I live in a quiet, suburban neighborhood where everyone generally keeps to themselves. Families barbecue on the weekends, kids ride bikes in the cul-de-sac, and for the most part, life is peaceful. But things changed about 6 months ago when my next-door neighbor, let's call him Dan, decided to install security cameras around his property. At first, I didn't think much of it. Break-ins had been happening a few streets over, and honestly, I understood wanting extra security. But one afternoon, while working in my garden, I looked up and realized something disturbing. One of Dan's cameras was aimed directly into my backyard, not angled toward his driveway, not facing his garage. It was pointing straight at my patio, my grill, and even the sliding door into my living room. It creeped me out. My wife felt uncomfortable sunbathing. My kids didn't even want to play outside anymore. So I walked over and politely asked Dan if he could adjust the angle so it only covered his own yard. I even offered to help him reposition it. But instead of understanding, Dan smirked and said, "If you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care?" That was my first red flag. Weeks went by, and every time I stepped into my yard, I felt watched. It wasn't paranoia. I could see the little red light on the camera blinking at me. I brought it up again, this time more firmly. Dan brushed me off, saying it was for his protection. So I called the police to ask about the legality of the situation. The officer came out, looked at the angle of the cameras, and actually agreed that it was invasive. He warned Dan to reposition them, but since the cameras weren't recording inside my house, it fell into a legal gray area. Dan was furious that I involved the cops. That night, he came to my door and told me, "You're making this a bigger deal than it is. Drop it, or things are going to get tense between us." Well, I didn't drop it. Instead, I went to the HOA. They were surprisingly on my side. Turns out there was already a rule in place about surveillance equipment needing to be directed onto your own property only. Dan got a formal notice from the HOA demanding he reposition his cameras. And here's the kicker. Dan ignored it. He thought he was untouchable. So the HOA started fining him $100 a day. He racked up over $2,000 in fines before finally caving and adjusting the cameras. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, Dan tried to play the victim. At the next HOA meeting, he stood up and ranted about how he was just trying to protect his family and how I'd ruined his peace of mind. But then another neighbor chimed in. She revealed that one of Dan's cameras had been angled into her daughter's bedroom window upstairs. The entire room went silent. Suddenly, everyone realized this wasn't about security. Dan had been invading multiple people's privacy. The HOA doubled down on fines, and eventually Dan had to remove half of his cameras entirely. He's been bitter ever since, but at least my family and I can enjoy our backyard without feeling watched. So now I've got to ask, would you confront a neighbor if their cameras were pointed into your yard, or would you just let it slide?